Dept is our last speaker, but don't leave. All that's waiting on you. So if you haven't had tickets, you might want to get them whenever you can. Jimmy's back there waving them now. Ed's over here waving his now. All right. So let's go on and get to the last speaker. Our final speaker today is going to be Mr. Ryan Okey. He's with the Department of Pesticide Regulation. His topic today is going to be regulatory issues with spray foam insulation. Now, before I introduce this last speaker, I can only hope the PCOs know how fortunate it is we are able to have a Department of Pesticide Regulation to work with versus maybe something like Department of Ag. We found that they've always given us a level playing field, and we know it'll be fair. So if you're not aware of this, find time to speak with one of the attending regulators and let them explain a little bit about what they do and how they help us, because they're not really against us. I know a lot of people get concerned when they hear Department of Pesticide Regulations coming to see them, but it's not always bad. So Ryan graduated from Clemson University with a bachelor's in turf grass science and a master's in agriculture education. He started working for the Department of Pesticide Regulation in 2003 as a field investigator. He currently serves as the assistant director where he oversees the department's field operations, enforcement decisions and actions, and commodity registrations in South Carolina. He's also an instructor for the advanced technician training and master termite technician training as well, and WIR workshops. And he also serves on multiple boards and committees. So let's please put our hands together and welcome one of our own, Mr. Ryan Okey.
Can you hear me good? I don't know if it's working. Hear me all right? All right, so first, thanks for having me. As Randy mentioned, I started with the department. I started down here on the coast. Worked as an investigator here for about 10 years. And I can say that I've seen the association grow, and I can say without certainty it's probably one of the strongest in the state, similar to what David said. And this training alone is a remarkable training. You guys do a great job, especially the leadership group here. You do a really good job. I don't know if he's going to pull up the presentation or not. So I got asked to talk about spray foam, and go back about 2 years. I was invited with a few members from industry down to the coastal area down in Ridgeland to meet with the home builders and Spray Foam Alliance. And it was about 3 years ago now, and there was some concern regarding installation. And at the time, it didn't seem like it was that big of an issue. So I went down. What has since happened is like a wildfire has grown. If I could get a show of hands, how many in here have been impacted by spray foam in your business? Okay. So I would expect you to see more. So what I'm going to talk about is the regulatory perspective of it. I got some questions built into the presentation as well, but what I would also encourage you is to ask questions towards the end if you have some that are impacting you or you're looking for answers from our side of it. So, just a quick overview. We're going to look at problems with foam, talk a little bit about the spray foam industry, some uses that it may have in pest control, some of the claims that they're going to make, what our department's role is, how it impacts you, how it impacts homeowners, and then what we have seen from a case perspective from investigations that we've had. To give you a little overview, I got to say up front, I'm not a spray foam expert, and I'm not in any way saying that it's a bad thing or a good thing. What I'm going to show you is what we've seen in it and how it's impacted your industry. So looking at it, just a quick Google search pulls up some statistics of spray foam insulation. First and foremost, it says it's a powerful insulator. Spray foam tightly seals all nooks and crannies that otherwise would have been left exposed. So, okay. Incredible energy savings. Spray foam insulation is shown to provide energy savings at an average of over 50%. Pretty significant, 50% in their energy savings. Again, airtight seal. They're real adamant about the airtight seal. Powerful airtight seal is shown to be 24 times less permeable to air infiltration than other types of insulation. Moisture barrier. Spray foam insulation is impermeable to water. I kind of go both ways, right? It deters mold. Spray foam is not only water resistant, but it's composed of an inert polymer that provides no source of food or mold for bacteria. Homes that are insulated using closed cell foam are better protected against mold and mildew. Borderline of a claim there, I would say. Long lifespan. This is an interesting one. The inert polymer that spray foam insulation is comprised of allows it to have an indefinite lifespan. You really want to put something on there that's going to last forever? I mean, it's permanent, right? And it's eco-friendly. This is the great one. Spray foam helps reduce energy consumption and creates a green household, and it's designed to last indefinitely. This is directly off the website. Again, I'm going to be very clear. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not an advocate for it. I'm not an advocate against it. I just want to give what our side of it is. So I don't know if you're familiar with the roto-molded coolers. They have this closed cell technology inside. And for me, these things are terrific, right? If you've ever tailgated before, you can load these up on Friday, tailgate all day on Saturday, and you'll still have cold beer on Sunday. I mean, you can't beat them. It is the greatest thing ever. So I asked, what's the problem there? What do you think the problem is? Anybody? Okay. For me, it's very easy showing you one picture of what the problem is. It is that. I'm a commissioned law enforcement officer in South Carolina, and if they would let me arrest someone for doing that, I would, because that's almost a criminal activity of doing that to a crawl space of a house. Like, when you look at that, how do you protect that house? How do you render any type of disclosure statement for that house, right? But going back to those statements, they're doing a great job of convincing homeowners why they should have it. So at the end of this, my hope is that you're going to do an equally good job of convincing them why they shouldn't, or having it installed in a manner that allows you to do your job. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying there's got to be some sort of guidelines or a relationship between you and the installer. But if the homeowners don't know that, they're going to get the first crack at it. So spray foam insulation, first and foremost, the industry is not regulated. You guys have been regulated for over 30 years, right? You have certification, you have recertification, you've got licensing for businesses, you have regulations for your applications. Many, many, many layers of regulation, rules, and laws. They don't have any, right? And that's difficult because there are some great companies out there. There are some companies that do some great things. But they're only as strong as their weakest one. And I can assure you, these companies pop up overnight, and when they do, they may only be in business for a week, but what kind of damage are they doing in that time period? They have no standards for insulation. Everything that they do when they get back into these types of installs, they impact the treatment that you're going to try and perform, or the treatment that you've already performed. They're going to impact the inspections that you're going to do. They're going to impact disclosure of WDOs. And this is the most important part. I agree, there can be some sort of compromise between how the product's installed, leaving some sort of inspection gap for you. That addresses the pre-construction side, right? Because you're assuming at a pre-construction stage, there's no damage present. My concern comes from the post-construction side on the retrofitting houses. Those technicians are not trained to identify damage. So what happens to the damage that goes underneath the foam? I mean, they're not there to report it, they're not there to inspect it. And think of how long you've been doing this, or your technicians have been doing this. You learn something new every day. You're not going to put these technicians through a 30-day training to identify WDOs. It's just not going to happen that quickly. So I don't know how you get around that side of it. You can create installation guidelines, you can create BMPs for the pre-construction side of it. It's the post-construction side that I don't know how you're going to get around concealing damage. Because how many homeowners out there you think are just trying to sell their home, there's something prohibiting them from selling it, Do you think they're savvy enough to hire someone to conceal it? Yeah, and we've seen it. So, where we get involved, we have some limited authority with spray foam installation, and it comes back to a pest control claim. We get out of the Groupon. This was actually a company right here in Charleston, and if you look at the claims that they're making, it says it eliminates pest and insect intrusion. That's a pesticidal claim. So if you're going to make that type of claim, you got to have some data to support it. And on top of the data, what does everyone in this room have to be to make a pesticidal claim on a structure? You got to be licensed. You got to have a pest control business. That's the easy fix for us. We issue cease and desist for these, and they go away pretty quickly, and we haven't been challenged on it yet. And I get, you're probably going to tell me about one today that just popped up yesterday. It does. It happens often, and we address it when it's brought to our attention. To date, I'm not aware of any type of foam that is registered as a pesticide. Where the problem comes in is depending on the type of claim that they make. So if you create a product that's impregnated with an insecticide and it claims to protect the foam, then that's not a structural pest control claim. And it's kind of a marketing ploy, and there's a couple of products out there that make that claim. But if they claim to protect the structure, then they've got to have data to support it. EPA also has exemptions for treated articles, which gives them a little bit of flexibility in creating products as well. But again, they can't make any type of pest control claim with foam. For us, we're very lucky to have a pretty widespread or wide scope of definitions that we have. It gives us the ability to regulate things. Within our definition of pesticide, it means any substance or mixture of substances intended for preventing, destroying, repelling, or mitigating pests, period. Some states don't have that. I know that sounds crazy, but there are states out there that are label states. They strictly have the label to regulate and no definitions to go on. This is under our South Carolina Pesticide Control Act, and it would require federal and state product registration unless it falls under some sort of 25B exemption, which that's a whole other issue there. But we do have a definition that allows us to have some authority over these types of companies. Our structural pest control activity prohibits them from making a claim from the licensing standpoint. And then which would also require the pest control business license. Of all the companies that we've encountered that are installing spray foam, when they're making the claim to protect the structure, when we do get involved, they drop the claims. So we're not saying they're going to stop installing spray foam, but where our authority ends is when they stop making a claim to control pests or to protect the structure. To date, I'm not aware of any that have pursued that direction with the data or the licensing or certification. That doesn't mean there aren't pest control companies out there that do this. They just have dual services that they're providing to these homeowners. Where we do have a little angle in the regulations, rigid foam board of polystyrene insulation or similar materials. That's a pretty important term there. We consider to be wood-to-ground contact. So, if you encounter wood-to-ground contact on a structure, what do you have to do to it? Right? You have to break it or wave it. If it's a pre-treat, you can't wave it. So during pre-construction, these types of things, if you encounter them, they're going to have the exemptions to remove yourself from it. In the post-construction situation, you have two options. You got to protect the foam. I don't know any way of doing that. Or you got to break it. Someone asked the question earlier about waiving it. Go backtrack a little bit. You can issue a waiver during pre-construction. And if you want to waive this when it's in contact with the ground on a post-construction, that's insanity. It is absolutely, I mean, yeah, you're going to protect you from us, but you're not going to protect yourself from that liability. Yep.
On the pre-treat, most of the spray foam is being applied after a pre-treat. You don't know about it until you get there and first thing in the door.
Yeah.
How great we're going to handle that well.
We're getting there.
Okay.
So, going back again, when we have the flexibility, a lot of states don't have this. And this was created back with the EAFS issue. And the question is, well, what do you have in terms of information for us? The elements are the same. It's foam, whether it was in a rigid foam board or similar other materials. It's the exact same thing. It cannot be installed during the pre-construction. On the post-construction, you got to break it or walk away. So our role is limited to the pesticidal claims. If they're providing any type of pest control services or pest control activities, obviously regulating contracts. We, in South Carolina, we don't regulate the conditions that you create in your contract. But it's very, very important that you have language in there to protect you when you encounter these types of installs. Now, we'll go kind of back to what you're saying, and I'll get a little more in depth when I get into the BMP side of it. We have minimum elements that your contract has to say, and it all goes back to pre-construction or for most in coverage. And how you go about putting that information in there is up to you, as long as it meets what the regulations require. We don't have a requirement for you to include altered structure language. And I think that's what some of the companies refer to it as. So Bert, your contract, do you have a statement in there regarding the homeowner altering their structure? Okay, so again, it's important. Believe it or not, there's companies that don't, and I've seen it. So when you encounter this, they don't have that ability to move out of the contract. They don't have language to protect them if a homeowner installed this after their treatment. And then there are some exemptions to it as well. The warranty requirements within the regulations are limited to single-family residential. And that's how it's defined in the regulations. It does only apply to single-family residential pre-construction treatments. So pest management professionals. I'm going to look at it from about 2 or 3 different sides. First one we'll look at it is that your treatment occurs prior to installation. And I hope that this is the only time that you encounter it. Unfortunately, I'll cover the other side of it. First and foremost, you've got to educate the homeowner about it. It's more prevalent on the coast than it is in the upstate. But every opportunity that you have to make them understand the impact it's going to have on you protecting the structure, you treating the structure, and continuing to do business with them long term, you have to have. Now, I'm not saying you can't have some sort of agreement with them, but you have to be transparent with, if you're going to bring a company in, we need to be part of that conversation. You got to have a condition in your contract that's going to remove you from the service if they violate the terms of that contract. I talked to you a little bit about it, calling it the altered structure contract or condition. Documentation is going to be key. We're going back to the treatment occurs prior to the installation. When we get called out, I mean, what are you going to show us that's going to show you that we treated this prior to the installation of the foam? What documentation do you have? Do you have a graph? Do you have photographs? What type of information do you have? It happens. I mean, there's gaps in treatments, there's gaps in coverage, there's gaps in communication. And the number one breakdown that we always see is communication. When homeowners call us, they're angry, first question we ask is, did you talk with your company? And 99% of the time they say no. And I can assure you the first thing we say to them is, contact your company, and then let's see what we have after that. So when you have opportunities to speak with them, whether it be for renewals or pest control services, you got to capitalize on educating them about this. Talked to a couple companies in here today, and I'm not saying that you're doing a bad job at it, but I will say the spray foam guys are doing a better job of selling it than you are of educating the homeowners at times. You've got to make them understand the impact it's going to have on the treatment. So, what do you do when the treatment occurs after the installation? If you pull up and you engage into talks with the consumer about treating their house or protecting their house, make certain you know what that crawl space looks like before you do. I'm telling you, and even going back to this, I understand your business model, what it requires your technicians to do. I've seen dozens of times that technicians are not going in the crawl space and they say they are. So in year 2, this gets installed, and then they finally tell you about it on year 5. Well, you've been renewing me for 3 years. You know, it doesn't matter if you treated it before or not. Why haven't you told me about this 3 years ago? Why are you telling me now? And when you ask that technician, he's just going to end up telling you, well, I haven't been going in the crawl space. That's a problem. My opinion, this is a bigger problem. Now, there are systems in place that you can provide a treatment, and you can protect the home. This isn't one of them. If you encounter this, I would get away from this as quickly as you possibly can. Whether it be for the issuance of an infestation report, or performing a termite treatment. So, you got to ask yourself a few questions when you're looking at it. A lot of the times, the question I get is, if it's installed like this, can I treat the house? If it's installed like this, should I issue a warranty? If it looks like this, should I issue a contract? I can tell you what I think, but you guys, you have to answer those questions. You have to know what your business model is going to do, or what the policies you have in place for your technicians to answer those questions. First and foremost, I want to know if I'm performing the liquid treatment, can I trench and treat the structure, right? What do I have access to re-inspect the structure? How much of it do I want to feel that I'm comfortable looking at? How do you protect it? And when your protection is in place and then it fails, what do you tell the homeowner at that point? You got damage now, I'm leaving? Yep.
You mentioned that, you know, that you got right there, is that the code violation? Or that was the code violation?
No, but I'm going to get there. It's one of the questions.
I'll
That's the question that gets towards the end. But you see how I think built into it, because I've seen a lot of the questions already. But I will say, codes enforcement guys, they've kind of butted heads with us about this. You know, the way the code is written, if you're going to identify a means of protecting foam with a product, it should be determined by the agency that regulates the products, and it's not. And that's concerning, you know. Because there's language in the code that allows me to use foam if it has an acceptable means of protection. So, wood infestation reports, same thing. It impacts your inspection, it impacts disclosure. You have a choice. Make sure the technicians know when you go out there, you don't have to do the wood infestation report. You don't have to do the inspection. You don't have to do the treatment. What you do have to do is make certain you know what is inside that crawl space. You know, because it's a bit misleading when you go into these houses, you engage in talks, you're signing contracts, you're signing waivers, and then you open the crawl space door and you're like, whoa, wait a second. Make certain you know what is in that crawl space and document it. It creates inaccessible areas in the structure. What about leaks? Has anyone ever seen what happens with an ice maker, ice machine, when it gets a little slow drip? Didn't we establish that this is water resistant and not permeable? So it's going to retain moisture inside of the structure, right? It conceals conditions present in the structure. It conceals thermal readings. I know a couple companies in North Carolina have been looking at what these installs do when you hit it with a thermal camera. It's not going to tell you what's behind it. If it's creating that thermal savings or thermal property, the camera's not going to see through it, or your IR camera isn't going to go through it. The other part of this is everyone focuses on the crawl space. It's not just an issue with crawl spaces. It's attics, other areas of the structure. Because if it's going to conceal moisture, what happens when you have a roof leak? Same thing. So when you're issuing wood infestation reports, or you're conducting inspections for them, it's not just about knowing what's in the crawl space, it's about knowing what's in the attic as well. Keep in mind that disclosure of insect activity falls under the entire house for a wood infestation report. I get that there's that first main floor for decay damage and issues. Insect damage is the entire house. Couple issues that have come up recently: fumigation and aeration. Again, it's airtight. Remember, no nooks and crannies. It's sealed tight. So what happens when you're aerating the structure? what's that do to your thresholds that you're trying to establish for minimal? I think it's 1 part per million. This is pretty big. I don't know anyone that's seen this. This was issued last week from Douglas Products. They're the manufacturer of sulfurofluoride and Systex, dated September 18th. And if you look at it, I don't know if I have, don't have it. If you read it right here, recommending that fumigation industry cease using Vicane to fumigate single-family residential structures constructed on site and other structures of similar construction with unfinished attic insulated with PSFI polystyrene foam insulation as described above. This is the first that I've seen a manufacturer that's taken a position on it. And I think this is a pretty significant one. It's impacting the ability for you to aerate that structure to the correct threshold. So consumers, I always say, when it comes to their house, it's the single largest investment that they're going to make. They're going to do anything they can to protect it. So your side of it has to be convincing them more so than the other side, the industry side of it. You know, my dad, I always refer to my dad when it comes to the what ifs, and you know, my dad's the smartest man I know, but when it comes to taking care of his house, he tends to make bad decisions. And he's had at least once every 6 months one of these companies that knocks on his door, and they've got him convinced, you know, I got to do this, you know, call me. And I left this blank here, but they told me it would. I read you a list of 7 or 8 things. You've got to be able to fill in the blank as well. Make certain that you're telling consumers what it will do as well. Because like I said, right now, the incentive that they're creating, whether it's real or not, is more attractive than the downside. One thing I always say is if you weigh out what are they going to gain versus what it could cost them long term in their house. And I'll get into some of the financial side of it in a little bit. But for me, the potential that, as you know here, Formosan termites could have on a structure versus how much in energy savings, they're not going to be equal equations whatsoever. You've got to remind them why. You've got every opportunity that you have to tell them and inform them, you have to take advantage of. You can show them why. There's a company in here today that had foam, you know, these salesmen are telling them what termites won't do in foam. Well, yank a piece out, show them what it looks like. And remind them, continue to remind them every opportunity that you have of what spray foam could do. So I'm going to get into a few investigations that we've seen, and I need to get some of the details for it here. And what I want everyone to kind of get away with is that talked about the waiver with the post-construction side of it. The implications you'll face with us when it comes to this is minor what it'll cost you financially with the consumer. So this is actually a house that I looked at here in North Charleston, I believe. Spray foam was present, and a company came out and they issued a wood infestation report on it, right? There was a few elements that weren't quite covered, which I found some brown cubicle rot on. They called the substructure inaccessible, though, right? That doesn't look inaccessible to me. So that was an issue of disclosure. And going back to it, I knew the company that had the house under bond, and when the new homeowners had purchased the home, they called the company to transfer the bond. That company called me and said, that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. But what was there was the brown cubicle rot from previous issues that they had disclosed to the previous owners to correct. So what do you think those previous owners did? They got a spray foam company out there. They sprayed the entire substructure. They did a wood infestation report on it, and they closed on the house. This actually had an area underneath of it, and I'm not certain if the guys in here or not. The company that had it under bond that wasn't transferring it crawled underneath of it, and there was an area under the house that looked like you could tell something was happening on the other side of the foam. We found out the hard way it was an ice maker that was leaking when we popped it, and it was like this giant bubble that belched water all over us for about the last month. But it does a good job of retaining moisture. So, back to it. Enforcement side of it, they failed to disclose ground decay damage. You know, based on where they were in the matrix, I believe it was a warning letter, and I believe the settlement amount was approaching $100,000 for damages. So again, warning letter, $100,000 in the liability from it. This is another investigation that we had. This was a pre-construction. They created inspection gaps around it, had a pretty significant crawl space as well. They had a borate treatment performed underneath of it. You see you have tubes going around into the foam, and everything appeared based off of what we could review from the regulations. None of it was in contact with the soil, but they ended up finding formations on the third floor of this house when they had spray foam in the attic as well. I don't know if you get into this. Enforcement, again, we didn't find any treatment issues. It was done during pre-construction. There wasn't a matter of waiving these elements and things like that. They were addressed during the treatment. The company continued to do business with the consumer. There was no enforcement. There wasn't a violation to what we said. So what do you think the cost was? What's spray foam plus formations on the third floor cost? A lot of money, yeah. This is another one. I believe this was in the Midlands. This was actually an elderly couple, and this was treated after the foam was installed. They renewed the structure for 4 or 5 years. They had the homeowners convinced of the impact that the closed cell foam will have over their open bad insulation. Found subterranean termites, I believe, in year 4 or 5. They voided their contract. Enforcement, this was actually in litigation, but going back to the enforcement, they had the language in their contract, the homeowners couldn't establish when they had it installed versus when the company had treated the house. We knew when the treatment occurred, we didn't know when the foam had been installed. So again, going back to documentation, it's important to be able to identify when the structure is altered, when the structure is changed. One more. This is installed after the treatment. This goes back to the example I gave earlier. The technician, they renewed this for 4 years. They found out about it in year 5. It had been installed about a month after the initial treatment. How many times do you think the technician had gone to the crawl space over those 5 years? None. This had some issues with treatment standards. This was a commercial operator warning letter. This structure is still in litigation as well. So going back to it, you see the discrepancy, and we have limited authority when it comes to spray foam. We do what we can on our side of it to weed out the companies when we can that are making claims, but what we can't weed out is when they're telling consumers all the great things it's going to do. Alright, so I kind of put some questions in that I've gotten from companies over the last couple of years. We'll have time for questions at the end as well, but these are some of the questions that I've encountered. Should we provide termite coverage if spray foam is applied to a home? I can't answer that. You should know the answer to that question. And if you don't know the answer to it, you have to have a policy in place that addresses when your technicians go out to these structures and they encounter it, right? It really depends on what you want to do going forward, what you're comfortable with, how much of the structure, where the spray foam is installed, is it in the attic, is it just in the crawl space, is it around the pipes? That's a decision that you have to make. I can't make that decision for you. Will you tell our customer that Clemson is making us cancel their contract? No. That I can say with absolute certainty that we can't tell your customers that. Your contract does. You've got to have some language in your contract that's going to protect you if these installs are made after the treatment. Now, if you treat a structure after if you come up across a structure that has spray foam installed on it and you try and protect it and it has the extending down into the ground, down into the slope, nothing is going to protect your customer. you might as well just engage in the talks and buying that house. Are spray foam products mixed with borates better? So this was actually a good question. There are no products that can make a claim. So is it better than some other form of foam? I don't know. I'm not a foam expert. I know there's no products that they can make a pesticidal claim with that are registered. So the question would be no. As far as its insulating properties, you would have to ask the spray foam industry or spray foam experts whether or not it has an impact if it has borates in it. I do know that there are some products out there that have borates in it, but they do not make a pesticidal claim. It's done more so as a fire retardant because it impacts the ability of foam to burn. So don't get confused with those two things. Just because you see that doesn't mean they can make a claim to control pests in the structure. What if a builder asks us to perform a borate treatment to the wood before spray foam insulation is applied? And there's a lot of other questions that I think I would ask as well. Doesn't matter how much of the structure you treat with borate, if the foam provides a bridge over the treatment or around the treatment, what's the point of treating? So I'd have to see a specific install to tell you whether or not yes or no. But even then, that's the decision that you got to make when you're out on site. You've got to make that call. If spray foam is applied underneath a home to the subfloor, besides being able to have clearance from the soil, what is Clemson's requirements about stainless steel plate gutters? What clearance should there be at that area? I think this is the question that you asked. The requirements within the Residential Builders Code for installation of foam and how close or the proximity that it can come within soil. That's not our regulations. Our regulations are a treatment standard for soil and clearance in the crawl space, not about foam. So the way we view foam is if it comes in contact with the soil, we look at it as with the ground contact. I reference you back to your local builder's code or the state builder's code if they don't have a local code of what it should be. Are you familiar with what it is? Yeah, 6 inches. Okay. What are your thoughts about plumbing pipes that are through the subfloor that have spray foam around them? We are unable to do a proper inspection. Should this area be covered? First and foremost, you're not going to only cover certain areas of the structure. It's an all or nothing, right? For me, I want complete access for my inspections. On my re-inspections, anytime I'm there, I want to see what's happening. So going back to the initial question, should I ask for coverage on this house? You got to have some policies in place that are going to make that decision, or direct your technicians to make that decision, or your managers to make that decision. What do your policies say? This is a big one here. What is regulatory doing about spray foam insulation? We're doing as much as we can. We have a limited role. What was that? So we don't have the ability to, if we could educate every consumer in the state on it, we would. But what we have done over the last couple of years, this is about the 10th or 11th talk that I've done with the State Electrical Association, Dr. Benson's forums, local associations. I'll come out to the companies that have questions about it, like a question and answer with a technician. We're working on a bulletin right now, similar to our rigid foam board with eaves that we had 20 years ago. The message hasn't changed though. Anytime that foam comes in contact with the soil, it's the same issues that you had 20 years ago. NPMA, I believe, has a consumer alert out. I don't know how helpful it will be. And Georgia Department of Agriculture has recently issued a consumer notice as well. Doesn't really share a whole lot about it, but trying to inform homeowners. We have a draft of the bulletin right now, and I would look to probably have it out in about 6 weeks. We knew that some of the manufacturers for fumigants were getting ready to make a statement on the uses of the product, so we were a bit reluctant to issue it until we saw what their positions were going to be. Just a quick summary, know your contract, right? Take a good look at your contract. Don't wait until you find spray foam in the crawl space on a house you've been treating for 3 years to see if your contract's going to protect you long term or give you the ability yourself from that. Communicate. You know, I said the breakdown of communication with consumers is where it occurs first. It also happens in your organization. Make sure your technicians understand, you know, the impact spray foam is going to have, and know that they're going in the crawl space. You know, there's two things that I've seen a drop off in the years that I've been doing this. There's number one, which is an unrelated topic. No one knows how to do conventional liquid treatment anymore. It doesn't exist. Number two is technicians are doing as little as they possibly can when they go out there during inspections, which means if there's a crawl space and it looks a little nasty, they're not going to go in, and that's a problem for you. Document the conditions that are present, not during the initial treatment, but during every single time you go out there. Peek at that crawl space. Be informed. Read up on spray foam. You know, we're meeting with, I think it's Icing, which is the manufacturer of it here in a few weeks. They've asked to sit down with us for input. I think they're going to do the same with you as the Pest Control Association. They're looking for input, guidelines for installation. And again, I'm going back to it. I'm not saying it can't work, but you got to have a communication. There has to be some sort of system in place that establishes what you expect to see when these systems are installed, so you can do your job as well and protect consumers. Communicate to customers, educate them. You could create a bulletin as well of what you expect from the consumer side of it. You're providing a service, but here's what we expect on your side. And it's not just about spray foam. There's other issues that can occur at a structure that will drastically change whether or not you can protect it. That's all I have on spray foam. I have a few other slides on an unrelated issue, but I want to see if there's any questions anyone has or discussions you'd like to have.
I had one situation that I went out to where they had actually foamed over top of the carton.
Over top of what?
Carton.
Yeah.
And what I found was we removed it. It was open cell foam, and we removed it. And what was interesting, just so that everybody knows, I mean, there was literally thousands and thousands of dead termites in this foam, but there was just as many working in that house as there was in the foam. Just be aware again. I'm saying, see foam, don't just take it as just foam. You know, poke around some and see what you find, because you might be surprised.
Well, and it speaks to what I said about their installers. They're there going wall to wall. I mean, they're coming out there, installing and leaving. They're not looking for damage. They're not looking for wood destroying insects. They're not looking for any evidence of infestation.
Maybe a question.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a question.
This may be a question more for Kevin and Cecil, but are y'all aware of a foam insulation company who has now gone out there and gotten licensed as a pest control operator, and as part of their package of spraying the house with foam on new construction, they are doing a free borate pre-treat and issuing a warranty for that property. Okay, this is a foam insulation company. They're not a pest control, well, they're licensed. They've got a license, but they are structured as a foam insulation company. And conveniently in their warranty on their contract, they're excluding promotes and termites. Are y'all aware of that? Which I'm sure it's going to come up here in a year or two when they get promotes and termites in the homeowners. I'd be more than happy to provide you their names.
Please do.
Anybody else got a question?